4 years ago, we exposed how thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells litter the state of Louisiana.
The so-called orphaned wells can be found anywhere from people's backyards to our own waterways. But tonight we found at least one instance where a major oil company stepped up to say they would fix the problem, but the state essentially said no thanks. And those wells remain left for dead.
Words come to mind: incompetence, corruption, and unethical.
BP put in writing to a state agency it wanted to plug up to 15 abandoned oil wells in Terrebonne Parish.
It's not right. It's morally wrong.
But it appears our state government never reached out to the oil giant following that email communication, and instead has decided to plug those wells themselves. The cost to taxpayers could be millions.
The burden becomes to the taxpayers to pay to plug these abandoned wells.
But why should it be on the taxpayers?
It shouldn't be.
But this story has an interesting twist that starts our look at these abandoned wells on the waterways of Terrebonne Parish, including this massive tank battery. This story starts back in 2005, not with BP, but another, now defunct company called Baby Oil. It acquired more than a dozen wells in Terrebonne and established what's called a site-specific trust account, or SSTA. It allows a third-party independent contractor to estimate the cost to plug the wells. The state can collect the estimated amount to pay for plugging the wells. It's supposed to provide a sort of security blanket for the state and the company. The way the state wrote the law puts the rest of the burden on taxpayers if the SSTA doesn't cover the full plugging cost. Taxpayers must fund the remainder. Back in 2005, Baby Oil used a third-party contractor, Environmental Equipment Incorporated, to estimate the plugging cost. The estimate came back at $1.3 million to plug 13 wells. But the third-party contractor that decided how much Baby Oil should pay into the account wasn't actually independent. According to Secretary of State records, the independent contractor, Environmental Equipment, has the same Lockport address as Baby Oil and same owner, Lewis O'Neill or Neil Seward. So the same people running Baby Oil provided the independent estimate on how much it would cost to plug these wells. And instead of giving Baby Oil an accurate cost of plugging, the estimate and amount of money available turned out well short. Why would that be allowed?
I don't think we think it should be, at least as we're currently constituted. I have to see if we have any records of any issues.
I mean, is this wrong?
No, we should not. You should not have the same company guaranteeing as doing the work, because guaranteeing the SSTA as doing the operating, because if one goes under, both go under.
The law requires a fresh estimate every few years, and a new contractor, Satoon Construction, gave one in 2009 and 14, about the same amount, around $1 million. Insiders tell us typically these estimates rarely change much after the first one is done. Baby Oil went out of business in 2015, and last year the state's Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, put out a bid to plug some of the wells. The problem for taxpayers, that initial estimate by Environmental Equipment and the updated ones by Satoon came up short, way short. Instead of 13 wells being plugged for $1 million, that money will only plug and clean up 3 of the wells. So you and every other state taxpayer will fund the rest of the work. Are you going to hold Satoon accountable?
The problem is we don't know that they did anything.
They gave you an estimate that's well short of what it needs to be.
But I think that's one of the things we're investigating with trying to revamp the way we do SSTAs, is to figure out, is there a way to hold them, who's the folks who've offered the estimates for the SSTAs, accountable currently? If not, is there a way to do that in the future?
Don't use them again.
That's one of the things that may be on the table. I mean,
but it appears the state is taking a slow approach to holding anyone accountable. Has anyone said anything to Satoon?
I do not know. I haven't asked about that, because I don't know if we have anything in our laws or regulations that says we can do something to a company that gives a bad estimate.
You can fire them.
From giving, we might be able to say they give bad faith estimates. That's all.
But you haven't done that yet?
We're still investigating what our options are. We're figuring.
How long have you been investigating?
We first started seeing, like I say, the first one of these we called in was in 2018.
So you've been investigating for 3 years?
2020 was kind of a lost year, but.
Retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore has been a watchdog of these abandoned wells with the environmental group Green Army.
Most corrupt system I've ever seen.
He says examples like this reveal a broken system and state agency.
They're useless. State agencies, Office of Conservation and DNR are controlled by the oil and gas industry.
Now the story comes back to BP. A BP subsidiary was a former operator of record on these sites prior to Baby Oil. The state can often seek money from prior operators to plug abandoned wells. In an April 2020 email, BP gave the state a list of wells it planned to abandon, including the ones last owned by Baby Oil. And another email 3 months later, BP's well abandonment project manager once again says BP's legal department requested the company plug and abandon up to 15 wells as soon as possible. In a deposition from a lawsuit filed by the landowners against the oil companies, an attorney for the landowners questioned why the state didn't ask BP to plug the wells. The attorney asked, did anyone at the Office of Conservation reach out to BP and say, hey, we're about to go forward with this project that y'all expressed an interest in performing? Did anyone from DNR reach out at all to BP? The person answering those questions, Roby Fulkerson, is the manager of the Oilfield Site Restoration Program, which oversees plugging these abandoned wells. He replied, I specifically did not, and I don't know that anyone else did. So according to this deposition, no one at DNR asked BP if it wanted to help plug these wells. It just so happens Roby Fulkerson's resume shows he used to work for BP. And even after he received an email from BP saying they wanted to plug the abandoned wells, he never reached out to them.
Roby Fulkerson used to work for BP.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a conflict there?
No, he plugs wells. I mean, he's not holding them.
But he's in charge of the program, and he
He's in charge of plugging the wells. When it comes to going back to older operators, that is the job of attorneys. Those decisions are made above his head.
But this email was sent to him, and this program is not taking BP up on this offer, if you will.
Because they said their caveat was one we could not legally do.
And you're going to give me an email that shows that.
If I can find it.
The Department of Natural Resources says the caveat is that BP apparently wanted to use that SSTA money to help pay for the plugging of the wells. So we asked for an email that shows that demand by BP.
You would definitely get that in writing.
I would presume so. Well, before you
moved
on that deal.
Any good attorney would get that in writing.
If you're moving forward on the offer, the problem we have is
if
they make that
just to cover your bases, any good attorney would get that in writing if that was told.
I'd have to see if we have it.
The state never sent us an email from BP following this communication that showed the request. It apparently doesn't exist. To Lieutenant General Russell Honore, it's further proof oil companies control a compromised state agency.
The regulators, the people they regulate, tell them what to do.
That's what's happening here?
That's what's happening in Louisiana. It's called regulatory capture. The industry owns the people doing the regulating.
You think that's happening here?
Absolutely.
And you think what I'm showing you is proof of that?
It's proof, dead proof.
We reached out to the attorneys for the landowners. They had no comment on our story.